Hey, George, I want to welcome you back on our podcast. For those who haven't heard or met George, he is a force of nature, amazing individual. I think I'm super excited about all the success he's had in the last, since we last spoke. But George, maybe you can introduce quickly what you do, a little bit about your background, and then we can jump into some of the topics I'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Ram. And it's great to be back and talk to you guys. I'm the CEO of Opus Genetics, which is a gene therapy company developing novel gene therapies for different types of inherited retinal degenerations, which means children who are born visually impaired. And we've worked with Ram and the Tilda team now for a couple years, and it's been a great experience. And glad to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and so I think I'll jump off into the reason why I was super excited to bring you back here. I think we had our first podcast where we spoke about your mission with Opus. I want to say it's between 9 to 12 months ago. So, it's been a little while. And I distinctly remember your thesis and how you plan to do this at Opus. And I'll recap here, but I'd love to get you to weigh in on that. What I remember at that point was you saying, hey, there is this entirely um, unmet need for developing therapies for these certain class of diseases. They're rare, they're small in population, but they're economically unviable to fund. And it's very hard to build companies in that space, right? And what was the silver lining is you and us talking about how we can bring AI and some of these like technologies to actually make it viable and build a successful case. And, we'll see where that went. I think our audience will be excited to see where we've taken this thesis. But I'd love to hear, did I describe that right? And anything else to add there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the bottleneck was not the science, right? The bottleneck was the ability to organize the resources and execute in a way that made sense. The science we have is all from University of Pennsylvania, from Dr. Gene Bennett, who was the inventor of Luxturna, which was the first approved genetic medicine, which was for a type of inherited eye disease. And that was a decade ago, and nothing else was approved since then. And so we're trying to take, there are a lot of these things out there. We're trying to take some and get them across the finish line. And so, so since we last spoke, the thesis really was if we could use an AI enabled platform along with other things, right? We're being very creative on the regulatory side. We're being very creative on how we do clinical development, but is there a way to really innovate across the board to be able to develop drugs faster, more efficiently, and with the same high quality that's demanded by patients and by regulators? So since we've last spoken, it has taken off, right? So the business plan is now fully funded to develop 7 of these gene therapies for different kids, for different diseases affecting kids, to the tune of approximately $250 million that we've raised in the past year. We've executed on the first program, the LC5 program. It's a rare condition. It affects kids, around 200 kids in the United States. And we've treated the first 6 of those. And the second patient we treated was a woman in her 30s who had been blind since she was a child, and she had a remarkable improvement in her vision after treatment. She was featured on Good Morning America in November because of how impactful this was for her. We've also started the second program in a disease called Best disease. We've treated the first patient there. Similar results. A woman who was using a cane, she was in her 60s. She'd been blind since she was in her teenage years, was able to put the cane down, has significantly improved visual acuity, things like that. So really impactful stuff. Using the Tilda platform, using AI in particular, has made a big difference in our ability to execute at a high level with these programs, in a more efficient manner. So it's been great. I mean, and happy to dive into some of the specifics on that.
Yeah, I mean, George, first of all, this is like unbelievable. Like just everything you're saying is like what I think any person would want to wish if you're in like a clinical development career, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about multiple individuals getting essentially get to see the first time in their lifetime, right? That's what you're essentially saying. Like they're born blind.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think I feel very fortunate. I mean, I'm sure all of our team at Tilda, we're so excited that we were able to help. We were able to bring these programs to the table and execute on them. I think it definitely proves that AI teammates are real. They're actually able to do the real work and deliver value to customers and innovators like yourself. What I think I'd like to understand or just recap is why did you say these type of companies? I mean, clearly now it's changed, but you said about nine to 12 months ago before you raised all this capital. And, you know, I think the other day I saw that Opus is like in the top 5 stocks on the biotech index or something. Like it's
NASDAQ.
unbelievable. I
Yeah.
mean, what you guys have done is clearly amazing. So I guess what my point is that prior to knowing all of this, right, like 9, 12 months ago, before all the success came your way, why did you say that? And has that changed? Are you seeing a path towards like now these kind of companies can be founded? Can people can actually think about
For sure.
programs like these?
Yeah. So the traditional knock on rare disease, right? And the reason that these things are hard to capitalize is because it's, traditionally drug development is long, expensive, laborious. It just has not had much innovation over the years. It just is very prescripted and regulated, which you want to some degree. But in rare disease, you need the ability to be creative, right? There's no reason, when I make a batch of product, it makes basically 10,000 doses. And so for a disease where there's 200 patients, there's really no practical need to be able to make 3 or 4 batches of that product before you go commercial. So it's like common sense things like that you have to work across the board in order to get the timelines down and the costs down to make these things viable. The other aspect to them is that to make these viable, you can do multiple programs. So if you look at what we've done at Opus, we have 7 programs and they stack on each other. So if each of the 7 programs is treating 2,000 patients, by the time you do 7 of them, you're treating 14,000 patients. So is there a way that you can get efficiencies by stacking the programs? And that's one of the things that we've really used the AI teammates from Tilda for, is because these trials are very similar. It's really just switching out which therapy we have in it. And so if you can reduce the cost and time on that end, and make it so that each trial, while it's similar, can be started a little faster than the last one on that template, then that's a big win. And that's exactly what we've done, right? I mean, one of the mantras we had when we raised the financing round was that we can develop these things basically in 3 years for $30 million. And that was that's kind of the business model that's been funded, and we'll see if we can execute. And so far we have, right? I mean, and there's a long ways to go, but so far it's working out. And it is a template. I mean, it definitely can be used not just for the eye, but for other programs as well.
Yeah, and I want to talk about where this is going. I think just from my vantage point as well, get your take on it. But just hitting on the learnings from our side, from Tilda's side, right? We understand the heterogeneity of these operations, but there's also homogeneous like components to your protocol, various things which you could like stack on, like you said, layer them on. And
Hmm.
I think the industry problem which we've seen before AI teammates or like some kind of an AI agent coming in and doing this work is you have start and stop. That is it's just one of those problems where you can't really reduce the cost any further. There's always a base cost to like basically starting and stopping. And I think that's kind of been the industry model, right? Like a CRO would, if you go to them, say, I have 2 studies, but they're almost identical. It's just kind of, layering it on. To them, it's still 2 studies. It's still, there's a minimal amount of like commitment or resources which need to come in to be able to like price this. And I think that model's really like changed with these AIs because you can, for the first time, essentially use these AIs learnings and continuous learning loops to say, okay, it's just a continuous process, right? I'm going to have the AI do this extra work or the new work. And it's not completely new program or just an extension to what I've been sort of doing all along.
So that's why that's the root of why the CRO industry was invented, right? Was because if you were a pharmaceutical company, you really had a resourcing problem, right? Because if you start a trial, you have to hire all these people. And then if the trial goes away, now you've got, a lot of people and you want to be able to treat everybody right. And so by outsourcing that to a CRO, they, in the original model was that they could arbitrage that labor force across multiple programs at the same time and avoid churn of employees basically at pharmaceutical companies. And so I think that what you're describing with AI teammates is just taking that to the next step, right? It's where the original model of pharmaceutical companies where you had a ton of internal development and then you would have people, who had a lot of downtime or you'd have to ramp up really fast was essentially that logistical problem was essentially outsourced to the CRO industry. And now the CRO industry is taking the next step and pharmaceutical companies are taking the next
Yeah.
step to use AI teammates to help with that.
And
And
that's
the
actually interesting, right?
obvious.
Because maybe at a certain time in a certain point in history, it was possible to take a resource and have them context switch between different projects and essentially
Mhm.
get value. But I think over the course of time, at least my perspective is workflows got so complicated and
Complicated.
there's been new things which got added that that sort of context switch has a heavy cost. And so
Totally.
the original model doesn't work anymore, like it's not how it used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm seeing with essentially how AIs are able to help the CRO industry. Because, we work with quite a few of the CROs out there. I mean, and just to be clear, you are also using a CRO. It's just that you're
Mhm.
using our platform and the CRO to help this
Mhm.
happen. I
Yeah,
think it's
totally.
so interesting that maybe I'd love to hear a little bit about like what was the decision making process you took, of course, considering risk and reward in terms of picking the right CRO. I mean, you obviously bet on an AI based approach with us, with our platform and our AI teammates, but just
Mhm.
curious, like, what's the right ingredient of a CRO which you looked for and ultimately found, which helped out?
Well, there are a couple pretty simple things I cared about, right? So number one was I cared about the technology infusion that you guys brought. That's obvious. But number two was I cared about the domain expertise. So I wanted people who knew what they were doing in our world, in the ophthalmology world. And then number three is I wanted a team I could trust, right? And that was a big deal with it too. And so, the CRO we chose, Mentra, had a lot of people that I knew and had worked with in the past and trusted. And so those three things really created a really, really nice, a nice foundation for this. And look, our company's 30 people and we have, this time next year, we're going to have 5 active clinical trials, which is 2 of them will be pivotal, which is an amazing amount of efficiency for a small group. And it's made possible by, yeah, I don't think it would be possible with the original CRO model.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. And I think that's what's most exciting, right? I think we are absolutely very quickly entering that phase where I think this is going to become norm. Obviously, companies like us are powering a lot of this, and it's really fun to build and actually make an impact. I think
Mhm.
for us, the big exciting part is like we're seeing that impact from some of the earliest customers, including you guys. So very rewarding to be working in the space. I think one thing I'd like to talk about is perhaps like where things are going. I'm sure you've seen a lot of focus on new types of foundation models, biology based foundation models, which are potentially going to be the way to create new types of molecules, new types of targeted therapies. Without getting into specific names, there's been a lot of funding which is going into these companies right now. Do you have a sense of like where is that going? I mean, let's just assume a bunch of them are successful. They're able to bring a high throughput way of like discovering new molecules which can potentially cure diseases. I think as you're saying, you have 5 programs active next year. I can also see some of these companies, I think their roadmaps actually are calling out for 50, 100, 500. I mean, I've seen all sorts of numbers, right? So let me
Yeah.
take a look at like, you are in the trenches. I'm just curious what your take, uh,
So,
sort of
I
dreaming
mean,
that.
it's amazing what they're doing, right? I mean, they're basically turning it into a world where there will be no undruggable target in the future, right? I mean, every target that you can think of will be, with the assistance of AI or probably the lead of AI, will be able to figure out how to drug it. That squarely puts the bottleneck on the clinical development. And I think that we actually are there, right? I think right now there are way more fantastic candidates out there then there is the capability to get them through clinical trials. And I think that that's going to be solved. It's going to have to be solved by innovation through technology, also through regulation. I think what the FDA is doing around this has been fantastic so far in the past, since Dr. Makari has been in the job. But I think it's just it's gonna have to speed up, because it's gonna have to be able to keep up with this new pipeline, this extended pipeline of potential products. We have 5 active clinical programs. We're in ophthalmology. I don't know of any other company our size that has 5 active programs like this. It just, most companies, as you guys know, are a single asset, and you're in the whole team. A team of 30 people is working on that one program. We're going to have to figure out how to get 5, 10 times that number in order to, and it does a couple things. Not only does it get more science gets its shot on goal to show whether or not it's effective for people and helpful for people, gets patients drugs faster, gets creates a different model in the investment thesis of biotechnology. Right now, biotechnology is typically, you bet on a company that has a single asset. That company will run a trial that'll read out in a number of years, and it's typically either positive or negative, right? It's a very binary industry. If you have multiple products, it becomes less binary. So at Opus, we've got 7 programs, 5 of them in the clinic. If any combination of 2 or 3 or even one of those works, then it's a massive return for our investors. And so they're not just betting on one program, they're betting on a matrix, essentially. And the risk is very different with that. And a lot of times that risk is mitigated at the capital allocator sector. So that's what the venture capitalists do, right? Is they place multiple bets, obviously. But if you can do it within a single company, and that company can work efficiently enough to be able to execute it, then that's where it's best allocated. The reason that it's not typically been done there is because it's so resource intensive, like not just capital, like people, bandwidth, all the things that go into development, expertise that you need to get these programs done, that it's a lot to have more than one program. And I think that's a big thing that technology can enable, is the ability of a small team to really execute against multiple programs
Right.
simultaneously in parallel.
Yeah. And as you're saying it, right, I'm kind of having sort of like a deja vu moment because, we are obviously a software company. We're bigger than 30. We've got over 100 people here. But
Yeah.
but I could imagine the amount of work we're doing, the amount of scale which we have in terms of customer base, we probably should be about 4 or 5 times the size. For any given 5 years ago, that's probably where it would have been. But code generation has been such a prolific innovation in terms of LLMs being able to do code gen. And I think it really has a tremendous effect on the software engineering business right now. You can do a lot with a limited number of resources, right? And you can really focus, and you can actually, I think on a net basis, you can be more efficient and much more focused, and you can actually deliver better because you're just managing things in a much more sharper way. And I guess what you're also saying is maybe that's what's happening in your business and potentially where it'll go. If you can
Totally.
on the
So
envelope sort of swings, right? Like how many people
yeah.
are actually there.
It's
Yeah,
all about just getting getting people the ability to do the real work, right?
that's right. Yeah,
The real value add work, and then all of the other stuff that comes along with it, trying to take that off their plate as much as you can. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do with Mentra and with Tilda, is to just automate away a lot of these things that people typically in the past had to spend hundreds of man hours on.
yeah,
It's kind of crazy to think about,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean,
And
like
the
TMS.
quality
I
and
mean, yeah.
the rework and all this other like stuff which catches up, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It's only a part of it, right? So it does drive down cost, which is a great thing, but cost is only part of the program, right? Speed is just as important to me. Like, we have got to move fast. And and we've done that with you guys with site startup and things like that. We've seen real world examples now that we have of how this makes a big difference. And then quality is the third leg of the stool, obviously. And And the quality I think the way I think about it is that you really are taking the quality to a whole different level, because even if you have people doing quality checks, having the computer do them is faster, more efficient, and quite honestly, it can be better. The computer can pick up
Well, you're
things that
adding a
people
real-time
missed.
component to all of this, right? You're sort of moving away from discrete monitoring or discrete task completion execution to continuous, and that is a paradigm shift in the way I think AI helps. So it enables a lot of interesting models. I think we're just scratching the surface of how I see it in collabs. I think we're just sort of in the second, third innings as far as I'm seeing.
I would agree with that. I think that we've used AI teammates in a number of areas, but there's a whole lot more to go. I mean, we still have payment processing. We have some of the CRF work. You know, we still have a lot of things that we can get. That we're looking forward to working with you guys to roll out in the not distant future.
Yeah, no, we're working hard. We'll be there.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions on where you are as far as like the future, right? There's a lot of, I would say, concern about the future of the pharma services industry, CROs included. And, we get this question always like, so what does this mean when AIs are doing a lot of this work better, higher quality, faster, potentially cheaper? And I think I've taken the view, which I think you're going with in what you just said, which is when the risk reward changes, the opportunities and the number of shots are going to go, exponential.
Mhm.
It's hard to see that. I mean, like I really don't see a lot of people just like very quickly internalizing that. But given you understand the space well, you understand ophthalmology, the void, I suppose, which is like the unmet need, right, of diseases which have not been yet, um, addressed. What does that look like? I mean, are we thinking like 2x the volume, 10x the volume? I mean, in a world where AI is increasingly getting more and more efficient, and we have, more productivity in the industry, I would assume, yes, costs might come down on a unit basis, but I would assume the number of units will go much, much higher. It should, right? Like that's what's happened in at least in software engineering. That's what's happened, I think, with the number of um, uh, you know
Well,
startups which created has gone astronomical. So I'm just curious, like what is the roadmap you think of the future for biotech and number of programs which will be probably initiated as things go to start?
yeah, yeah. So, the kind of old axiom of you've got three legs to the stool, you've got time, money, and then quality, and you can't have all three. We've got a decent shot at actually breaking that
Yeah,
with
absolutely. That,
technology.
that is no
Yeah.
longer a I don't think that can be used anymore. We need to throw that out.
Exactly, exactly. I think that that's so I think that what you're gonna see is all three of those go up. And when that goes up, I think what I care about the most is that more science gets a shot on goal to see if it actually helps people. What that looks like in the real world right now to us, like I can give our example, is that our people are able to spend their time doing the work that actually is very specific for each disease and program, rather than more routine work. So right now where we've seen our efficiencies is in things like quality checks, things like speed to get speed to get sites activated. Costs have come down, that all is true, but the number of people in my company keeps going up. And what we are doing with that is really focusing people on the nuances of each disease. So
Mhm.
what I want the people that work at Opus thinking about is, okay, how do we connect with those patients, right? How do we get those patients? How do we get them into the trials? Like, I don't want them thinking, okay, how do we set up the site? And how do we get all the infrastructure in
Yeah.
place? We
How
want
do we
that
manage
site to
the
be set up.
regulatory completeness and all this like nuanced detail, right? Which an AI can just as easily do better.
Exactly. We need we need them thinking about, okay, what are the exact endpoints that we need to be looking at, and how are those a little different than other diseases, and how do I get the patient's perspective, how do I get the physician's perspective, how do I mold all that together into like the perfect protocol for this particular disease. And so I've got all of our people are working on elevating the quality of the studies by really, really getting deep into it. And people typically do, right? Like that's nothing new. What's new is the ability to arbitrage it over multiple programs in a small company. And that I don't think has been that I think is novel. That's why most companies my size have one program, is because you typically spend most of your time, if you're building the infrastructure and you're adding the nuance that goes along with every drug. Every drug is like a baby. You have to nurture it, you have to learn about it, you have to mold it. If you are doing that with the team and you have to do all the foundational work too, then you really cut down your ability to divide yourself across multiple programs. So that's where I think the arbitrage really is.
That's a, I can absolutely see where you're going with this. I think the way I look at it, going back to that question of the new age biotech, biopharma companies with, say, latest in class foundation model, which is able to find targets and drug them, right? Like, let's just say they're able to do that. I think one other skill we're also saying is most of the ClinOps space in this industry does not have the ability to focus on more than a handful of drugs at any given time, more than a handful of programs at any given time, right? Even if you had a stack of these like NCEs or drug candidates which are ready to go into your clinical
Yes.
programs, the scalability is just not there. But I
Hmm.
think you're essentially saying, given how you have set up your organization and your operations, that is something you're able to prove, at least to an extent of like 5 programs for 30 people. And maybe that'll expand. You can do like, I don't know, 30 with, instead of 30 programs with 100 people. I don't know. But that's really
Totally.
exciting. You think that's what we need, right? Like to kind of get to that level of
Yeah.
innovation.
That's absolutely it. Is how do you safely and efficiently get these programs into the clinical environment to give patients a shot? And yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're seeing on a micro scale with us, and it'd be super cool to see. And I'm sure there are people out there way smarter than me that are thinking about this at these bigger companies. But be if we can do, if we can take 30 people and do 5 programs, to your point, what could you do at Roche or Novartis or Lilly? It'd be amazing.
Yeah, or another opus, right? Like
Right.
maybe one of our audience is thinking about starting a biotech, and they can imagine a completely new world where they're competing with the Roche. And that's happened, right? Startups can hit well above their weight class, and
Hmm.
they have disrupted incumbents. And I think
Hmm.
when you have these like disruptive technologies come in, whoever kind of adopts them first and runs with them essentially has a disruptive capability. And at least we've seen that multiple times in the tech startup space. Incumbents getting disrupted. And maybe I think one of the things which I'm most excited about in a 10-year time frame is today we have your top 10 pharma companies. It's quite likely in 10 years this list is very different. Maybe this list is going to be companies we've never even heard of. Hopefully Opus is on
Hmm.
there, right? So
Hmm.
it's I kind of think that is quite a possibility. I mean, it's really leveling the field, at least on the clinical operations side. And then you have
Hmm.
the LLMs and all the other technologies which may come up with better druggable targets, which are also
Hmm.
leveling the field, right? So, then it's just about who has the best model, the best operational model to do an end-to-end development and prove value.
Hmm.
So it's like we're definitely entering into some sort of like a inflection point, sci-fi era of like drug development is how the takeaway from what you're saying.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. Yeah, and we haven't even dove into the ability to the ability to use AI in clinical science. We've been focusing mostly on AI teammates, which are amazing. But I think there's a whole nother world out there where the amazing amount of data that's available on patients, and how do you use that data to essentially select patients that are likely to respond to a certain drug. And that I think is another sort of holy grail of AI. We did it a little bit with a paper we published in the American Journal of Ophthalmology last year, where we were looking at diabetic patients and the ability to predict the response of their eye disease to different types of injections in the eye, just based on images from before, right? So if you could a computer look at the image of a patient's eye and tell you which drug you should select for that patient. And it turns out, yes, they can, but better than people. And so it's just the first salvo at this kind of stuff. But I'm very interested in that too. I think that's a really cool area for some of these LLMs
Yeah.
as they figure out.
Lot of avenues where I think we will see disruption. I think ClinOps,
Yeah.
especially we
Hmm.
focus on ClinOps, that sort of
Yeah.
tends to be very myopic for me. But I think from where you're sitting, it's very clear that there's many other areas where there's going to be really interesting disruptions.
Yeah. Totally.
George, I want to thank you for your time. Congrats on all the success you're having. We are huge fans of what you guys are doing. Your team, I think you've built an amazing company team. Kudos for being such a I guess on the frontier edge, right? We've loved working with you guys. So thank you.
Yeah. No, likewise. And we appreciate what you guys are doing and look forward to getting some approved drugs with you. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you,
Awesome.
George.
Yeah. Thank you.